Most people think the biggest threat to their growth is failure, not knowing enough, not being ready, not having the right resources or timing or opportunity. But there's something far more destructive than any of those things, and it operates quietly, invisibly, and almost always with your full cooperation. It's not ignorance. Ignorance is fixable. You can hand a person information and watch them change. Ignorance doesn't resist, it just waits. What actually destroys potential is confident ignorance, the state where you know just enough to stop questioning whether you know enough. And the reason this is so dangerous is that it feels exactly like intelligence from the inside. You cannot tell the difference between genuine understanding and a convincing internal simulation of it, at least not until reality forces the comparison. Your brain doesn't measure accuracy, it measures coherence. If an explanation feels internally complete, your mind files it as truth, regardless of how much it's missing. And once it files something as truth, it stops looking. That's the mechanism. And by the end of this, you're going to recognize exactly where it's operating in your own life right now. Here's what most people misunderstand about learning. Knowledge and confidence do not grow together. Confidence grows first, competence comes later. And the gap between them is where most real damage happens. When you start learning something new, your brain immediately begins pattern matching against everything it already knows. It finds familiar shapes, familiar logic, familiar structure, and the moment it assembles enough of those pieces into something that feels coherent, it generates a sensation of understanding, not actual understanding, a sensation. The feeling that the loop is closed, that the picture is complete. But the picture isn't complete. It just looks complete from where you're standing because you don't yet have enough knowledge to see what's missing. This is why a person with 3 weeks of investing knowledge often sounds more certain than someone with 20 years of experience. The beginner recently found patterns. The expert spent 2 decades discovering how many ways those patterns break. One sees clarity, the other sees variables, exceptions, timing dependencies, systemic risks the beginner hasn't encountered yet. And psychologically, that difference is enormous because certainty and expertise are often moving in opposite directions, especially early on. The moment your brain says, "I get it now," it stops searching. That shutdown happens much faster than most people realize. A few videos, a podcast, a couple of early wins, and suddenly your identity shifts from learner to someone who knows. That transition feels powerful. Certainty reduces anxiety. It gives your ego stability. Your brain rewards it chemically before reality has a chance to verify it practically. The internet didn't create this problem, but it built the perfect infrastructure to scale it. Social platforms don't optimize for accuracy, they optimize for engagement. And those two things are not the same. In many cases, they're directly opposed. A nuanced, carefully reasoned take requires effort to follow and generates ambivalence. An absolute, confident, simplified claim generates immediate emotional reaction. The algorithm reads both signals. It knows which one spreads. So what gets amplified over time isn't what's most accurate. It's what's most emotionally satisfying. And humans, before they're rational creatures, are emotional ones. We're attracted to certainty the same way we're attracted to warmth. It reduces anxiety, it offers resolution, it makes the world feel manageable. The result is an environment where platform size started to look like credibility. People with 2 months of experience built audiences teaching what they learned in month 1. People who used a tool for 3 weeks positioned themselves as experts in the technology, and because the feedback loop between confidence and social reward happens faster than the feedback loop between confidence and real-world results, the ego gets validated long before reality gets a vote. The dangerous part isn't the people doing this consciously. Most of them genuinely believe what they're saying. The platform told them they were right before reality could tell them otherwise. And once an audience confirms your worldview back to you every day, the incentive to question it disappears almost completely. This is where the research gets genuinely uncomfortable. Studies consistently found that people with the highest actual ability rated themselves lower than people who performed far below them. That sounds impossible until you understand what expertise actually does to how you perceive a field. When you're a beginner, you see a simplified map. It looks complete because you don't know enough yet to see what it's leaving out. When you're an expert, the map keeps expanding. New layers of complexity become visible: edge cases, failure modes, second-order effects, the things that work 80% of the time and collapse in the other 20%. The more you know, the more the territory reveals itself as larger than any map you could draw. Which means expertise doesn't make you more confident. It makes you more aware of how much is genuinely uncertain. And that awareness gets mistaken for weakness from the outside, especially by people who haven't developed enough knowledge yet to see what the expert is actually seeing. This is why the most capable people in most fields tend to speak carefully. They qualify. They say, "It depends." Not because they're unsure of themselves, but because their knowledge is sophisticated enough to account for conditions and contexts that the beginner has already simplified away. What looks like hesitation is actually precision. The beginner who sounds most certain and the expert who sounds most measured are often in the same conversation, and audiences frequently trust the wrong one. At some point, and it's always eventually, reality closes the gap. Your strategy fails in a way your model didn't predict. Your audience doesn't respond the way your assumptions said they would. The business that looked obvious from the outside reveals layers of complexity you hadn't accounted for, and the certainty you built your decisions on suddenly doesn't hold its shape anymore. This moment is psychologically brutal for one specific reason. Humans don't just attach identity to being right about facts. We attach identity to being the kind of person who is right. So when the belief breaks, it isn't just inconvenient, it feels threatening. Your brain processes it like a social danger, which is why the instinctive response is almost always defensive. Blame the market, blame timing, blame execution, while leaving the underlying model completely untouched. Protect the identity even at the cost of the lesson. But there's another response, less common, more valuable. Accepting that the problem wasn't just what you did, but what you understood. Execution errors are fixable without changing your worldview. Comprehension errors require accepting that your map was wrong and that everything built on that map needs to be rebuilt from a more accurate starting point. That's a different kind of pain, and it's the pain that most real growth actually requires. The people who eventually become genuinely difficult to compete with are almost never the ones who are right the most. They're the ones who recovered from being wrong the fastest and extracted the most accurate information from the experience when they did. That's a trainable skill, and it starts with one reorientation. Stop building identity around being correct and start building identity around updating quickly. A person whose ego depends on being right will unconsciously filter information to protect that. A person whose ego is attached to accurate calibration will actively seek out the information that threatens their current beliefs because that's the information with the highest actual value. Right now, in some areas of your life, you're legitimately skilled. In others, your confidence is significantly ahead of your actual understanding. And in a few areas, you don't yet have enough knowledge to even see where the gaps are. That's not a personal failure. That's the default human condition. Nobody escapes it. The question is never whether you're on the wrong part of the curve. You always are, somewhere. The question is whether you're honest enough to find out where before reality finds it for you. Because reality will close the gap. It always does. The only variable is how much it costs when it does. The most dangerous sentence you can think about any subject, any business, any relationship, any decision is, "I already understand how this works." That sentence ends learning at exactly the moment you need it most open. The people who stay dangerous over time aren't the ones who are confident the longest. They're the ones who are honest the earliest.